So the last one in our epic, this one, what's it called? Topic 3, Norman England, 1066 to 1088. And we start with, describe the feudal system, including keywords like tenants-in-chief, homage. Well, the whole feudal system was designed to provide William with A, an army in times of need, and B, money, because he loved a bit of money. And so he divided his land. See, that's the thing about, one of the big differences between the English feudal system and, the English Anglo-Saxon social structure and the Norman social structure, which was the feudal system, is that the king in the Norman structure owned all the land. No, nobody else owned land. The king owned it, except for the 25% he let the church have. And under Edward, under the Anglo-Saxon kings, people owned land outright. The king owned the most land, but other people could own their own land. And so under William's system, everybody who had land, they were like the people directly under him, the barons, they were his tenants-in-chief. Just like if you own a flat and you rent it out to somebody, they're your tenants. So they were his tenants-in-chief. And in return for the land that William let them use and gained profit from and stuff, they had to provide him with knights. So it was said that from all the tenants-in-chief, William could raise 4,000 to 5,000 knights, and also the tenants-in-chief had to get knights to garrison his castles for 40 days and nights a year. So that's how he made sure those castles were actually kept safe, kept protected. But also these people, they had to pay up the chain to William, of course, as well. Now, below the tenants-in-chief, there were the knights, and it was kind of the same sort of thing. They had to call themselves to fight for their baron, the person above them, their lord up in the system, but they also had to pay money up the chain, and everybody had to do homage up the chain. And that's one of those key words. Anybody's land is like the land that they control was called their domain, which is why that word's on the sheet. Domain spelt not how it sounds. So if you're looking at that word and you're like, domain, which one's domain? It's one begins with D. It looks like it says Demesne. So yeah, what else do we know? Well, at the bottom of the chain were the peasants. They, ordinary people, they grew food. They had to do labour service, so they had to work on their lord's land for a number of days, or their lord's domains. I'm doing it myself. Their lord's domain. For 2 to 3 days a week, and then the rest of the time they could work on their own land. So yeah, they all had to do service up the chain to each other, and there was taxes to be paid as well, and it all went up the chain. Everybody's person above them was their lord, below the king was their tenants-in-chief, usually the barons as well, called the barons, but if we think of it, king, tenants-in-chief, knights, and villeins, that's how it sets out in the book. That's the feudal system. Describe the changes to the church after the conquest. Well, Stigand, to begin with, was left in place, even though the Pope totally disapproved of him, and that's one reason the Pope had supported William's conquest. But when the Pope sent his men across, known as the papal legates, write that down if you want. I would if I were you. They came across, they said, Stigand's got to go, and these things have got to go as well. So one of those things was pluralism, which is what Stigand had done. You weren't allowed to be in control of two church positions, and Stigand had been Archbishop of Canterbury and Bishop of Winchester, which meant he got all the power and wealth from those two places as well, which is why it was not legal. There was also nepotism, which means basically making church positions run in the family. And one way he could get rid of nepotism was one of his other things, which was banning marriage. So all priests who were already married, they were allowed to stay married, but any new priests were not allowed to be married. And any bishops, because they were a bit higher up, if they wanted to stay bishops, they had to give up their wives. So that's kind of going to stop nepotism, because if they're not married, they're unlikely to have kids, or less likely to have kids anyway that were legitimate and could inherit the position. And of course there was simony as well, spelt like Simon with a Y. That was selling church posts. That was it. So maybe, say for example, Stigand, there was a Bishop of London, and somebody says, I want to be Bishop of London. He says, no, I don't want you to be Bishop of London. He says, hold on, I'll give you all this money. Stigand goes, okay, That's fine. That's selling church positions. That's simony, and that's not allowed. So Lanfranc came across to sort all of those things out. But there was also other changes to the church, like more things were built, more churches were built. William felt, well, the Pope had told him he had to show he was sorry for all the people that were killed in 1066. So one way that the earls, barons, tenants-in-chief, this group of really powerful people that have several different names that can be quite confusing, but I assure you they're the same things, barons, earls, tenants-in-chief, those people, they built churches on their land often to do their penance, it's called, to show how sorry they were. There's also a lot of monasteries created at the time or enlarged. Oh, and this is a big one. Church courts were set up. So if you were a monk or a priest or a bishop and you did something wrong, you weren't tried with everybody else in the normal courts, or you might say secular courts, secular meaning not religious. You'd be charged in the church courts. And also if you did a crime against the church, i.e. blasphemy. So if you're Anglo-Saxon, you went, oh, for God's sakes, that's blasphemy, you'd end up in a church court. And the church could use that to gain fines, but also to control. So as William giving away some power there to the church, that was a big thing, apart from the fact that there was an entirely new archbishop. So that was the church. How did the role of the sheriff change? Well, it's effectively the same in that they got a writ, and they carried out the instructions on the writ. However, they were far more powerful under the Normans. The hugely powerful earls disappeared with William's conquest. He didn't want really powerful people around. He wanted powerful people, but not that powerful. So he divided up the earldoms, and into the power vacuum stepped the sheriffs. The sheriffs controlled things where maybe the earls might have done a bit more controlling in the past. And also another reason they grew in importance is because William wasn't always in the country. He would, for the fact he was often in Normandy, his homeland, and that you could call William an absentee monarch. So the sheriffs, they got more writs. There was more ruling by writ done under William, and the king's domain. Well, maybe is it on here? We talk about the forest laws. The king, he set aside land, which was his own land. The forest laws doesn't mean trees. It just means the hunting land of the king. And if you lived there, tough. That's William's hunting land. So lots of people had to move because of this hunting business. But I've already talked about a domain. What impact did the Domesday Book have, and what was it? Well, just towards the end of William's reign, he decided he needed to take this inventory of England. Basically, he needed to know what was where, who owned what, how much did they own, and there's a few theories as to why he did that, to maybe settle some disputes that might have been going on at the time between different earls, also so that he knew how much tax that he could get out of different people. That's another potentially big thing. I'm just trying to find the page to just check that I don't miss anything that the textbook wants you to know about the Domesday Book, but I'm struggling, I can't find it. So, here we go. So yeah,